I am so excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
So happy to be here with you, Michael. Thank you.
What an amazing journey in your life, and what an amazing mission that you have.
Absolutely.
We all, obviously, we all, even from birth, we always want to know why. We always know as we grow, we want to know what our purpose is. We want to know how we fit into humanity, how we fit into life, how we can improve ourselves. I think it's a constant, ever changing desire to improve. I do believe.
I agree with you.
You know, I kind of we're going to get into a lot of stuff here, but I'd like to start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
I was born in sunny San Diego, California.
How about what your family like? What you have? Your brothers, sisters?
I had two brothers, uh, beautiful parents, very close-knit family. That's about it.
But that sometimes that's enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's enough. So I know that you we're going to talk about how you transformed into and recognize your ability to transform what you've done here. Did you go to university? What did you want to be when you grew up?
So my journey is actually a very unique journey in terms of what I wanted to be when I grew up. I did go to university at Cal State San Marcos. I wanted to be a writer in some way, but that wasn't all I had a passion for. I actually really wanted God more than anything. Since I was a little girl, my mother, she was actually a follower, right, of Paramhansa Yogananda. And my father, is a, very Christian man. And so I had a huge blend of both worlds growing up in my childhood. And I was, had experiences with everything. And I would go to church every Sunday with my dad. And then, I would, learn this other side of life from my mother's side. And it was a really beautiful blend between the two. I think they were very complementary to each other. And in doing so, this kind of upbringing gave me a lot of different perspectives on life and the integration, right? The comprehension that all religions and all spirituality is really complementary to each other. They really are all fundamentally touching upon the same truth and divine principles, divine fundamentals, fundamentals of our universe. And for me, right, the one thing that I really learned, right, I 100% followed the teachings and, everything from the Bible, from Jesus. But the one thing I learned from Yogananda and from my mother is that uh, this concept of the guru, right? And, you know, however you want to romanticize it or depict it, ultimately there is this idea, right? I had this extreme connection to divine from a very early age from birth. I just had this huge love and desire to become closer to God. I didn't know exactly what enlightenment was or what that meant or, what that encompassed. I just knew that enlightenment had to do with being close to God. And that's what I wanted because I had these incredible experiences of going into trance, going into samadhi, these experiences of enlightenment from an early age. So I didn't have a context and nobody talked about these things. So I didn't know exactly what they were. They just seemed like this is normal, this is life, this ecstasy I feel, this bliss, this love. And so I knew it was coming from God, though. I knew it was from that connection. And so that was my desire, was to just have more of that experience, more of that connection, right? To be able to control the trajectory of my life, to experience greater happiness, to control my mind, to be able to, optimize my potential, to become a better human being, to stay pure and innocent, and to, essentially be, I guess, the choice of God, whatever you want to say from like, a young girl's perspective. But what I found is that through Yogananda and with the teachings from Jesus is that essentially there is this enlightened being, right? Someone who has this connection, this already established connection. And it's fine, whatever you want to call it. If you want to call it God or consciousness, ultimately it's just a category or a way of talking about something. That's why we've gone into the route of science, because we firmly believe that, you can use religion to describe something, you can use spirituality, and you can use science. And they're all the same thing, right? It's like, however you want to call a rose, it doesn't make it smell any less sweet or more sweet, right? Like that Shakespearean quote, right? The rose will still be sweet. The rose will still smell the same. So, however way you want to describe it or talk about that true reality, that objective truth, it'll still be there and it'll still be the same. It's not going to change. And so that was essentially what propelled me, was to find a way to become closer to that truth, to that reality, and to find someone who could help get me there, because that's a huge gap. Like, it's not something that, no matter all the tools and things that everybody perpetuates and talks about, there isn't really something that I found that, made it seem like an easy transition to go from wherever I was now to God. That seems like a huge leap, a huge space. And so that's something I had the foundation of knowing from early childhood, that the enlightened, right? They had this divine embodiment where they could harness this consciousness, this universal energy, or this divine grace, whatever you want to call it again. And in doing so, they can connect you to that source, to that authority, to that consciousness, that pure consciousness. And that's what I wanted more than anything. So that was my life's mission and goal. Everything else was secondary. And in doing so, I maintained my innocence. My
Yeah.
whole life was about staying innocent and pure, and, just finding a way to connect. And that's it.
What a profound opportunity to connect with humanity from that perspective, from both the physical plane as well as a spiritual perspective, because I think that, especially at such a young age, what a gift.
I mean, every moment felt like a gift whenever that happened. It definitely had nothing to do with my doing. It was pure grace. That's it. That's all I can say about it.
Well, I'm glad that you found that, because obviously you're able to deliver a message to individuals and help them, take their lives and transform them into a positive outcome, which I think is like in itself is profound and brilliant. How did you discover your ability to transform living organisms, especially at a cellular level? How did you understand that? When we talk to somebody in regard to that light bulb that goes on, I guess it's the simplistic way of saying it. We get that light bulb that pops on and go, oh yeah, I could have done that, or wow, this is how this works. At what point did you discover your ability to transform living organisms at the cellular level? Like, 'cause I think that is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a deeper connection.
It is something you don't hear about, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the reason why we went into the route of science, right? Is, primarily because that's the thing with subjective experience. Like, I'm telling you my experience and my story. And I'm sure, as human, we have this innate sense of feeling whether you're, speaking the truth or, manipulating or lying. We have some idea, but at the same time, subjective experience requires you to take someone at their word and to trust them, especially somebody you've just met. That's a lot to ask for, right? And so my story, I don't want to share my story in any hopes that anybody's going to believe me. In fact, I would prefer it if they don't believe me. I want people to be skeptical, and I want them to think for themselves. I want them to trust in our science and the outcome more than my own experience of life, which is why the science is so significant. But for me, in my own journey, my own path, right, my transformation in consciousness, where I eventually became a conduit of this divine energy, led me to Guruji Mahendra Trivedi, my husband. And this actually started even earlier in childhood. When I was a very young girl, right, I had this strong connection with divine. So I had moments of incredible experience where I knew divine was speaking to me or conveying a message. And it's not like, a voice in your ear, like, God bends down and talks to you through your ear. It's more of like, when it happens, at least for me, in these moments, there is a feeling of something transcendental happening. There is an incredible stillness and peace that just completely envelops you. The mind shuts down, it becomes quiet. And from that quiet place, right, it's like your clarity and your sense of awareness and presence increases hundredfold. And in that moment, there's this stillness that conveys a message to you. And in that stillness, I remember when I was a little girl, I might have been like 8 years old, maybe. And in that stillness, it was when all these other girls and all these other people around me, had, relationships or were developing crushes. And I was looking around me and I felt like, I do want a relationship, but I have no connection with anybody. I had very difficulty connecting with people as a young kid because there's just a huge difference. It was hard to do. And in that moment, divine came and conveyed this message in that stillness that said, there is someone waiting for you, right? There is someone that I have picked out for you, and it's the perfect person, right? Whatever you need or require in your life, whatever will make you happy, that will be in this person. This is the perfect person, and they're a gifted person on this planet. They are my presence on this planet, essentially, right? That they embody this higher level of consciousness. They are a highly gifted, enlightened being. And I didn't know quite what enlightenment was, but I understood that they had that divine connection, that strong connection. And in doing so, they would help connect me to God as well. So I knew that from an early age. So my whole life was spent basically waiting to meet that person. And it was around 20 years of age where actually it started happening in 2019, where this incredible sense of loneliness and soul sickness and longing really kind of reached its peak in my life. And my mother, she actually heard about, Guruji Mahendra Trivedi, my husband now, before I did. That's how I met her, because she would take me to all these different, spiritual healers and, hopes that, one of them would help me solve this soul sickness and bring me closer to God. So we went to all these different people. We met other gurus, and we had all these different experiences with, healers and alternative medicine, many different avenues. And she finally, from, some friend of hers, heard about Guruji, and she went to get a blessing because she heard about all of this science research that he's doing. And she thought this is something unusual and very different. So she went to go receive a blessing, or at that time we were calling them energy transmissions. And she prayed essentially for the relationship between her and, my brother to improve, because it was a very rocky relationship in his teenage years. And with nobody was able to solve it. Nobody was able to help improve that relationship and create harmony between the two of them. And after one blessing, the very next day, right, she went to bed, woke up in the morning, and the next moment that they met, it's like whatever tension, whatever, you know, severity that was behind their relationship just disappeared. And they
Oh,
were happy and at peace with each other. She was like, I've never had this my whole life.
that's amazing. That's amazing. That's brilliant. That's amazing. That level of consciousness, that level of understanding, I think, has got to be. How does it make you feel? I mean, to be able to connect like that. I'm sure. Can you put that in words? It's a strange
No,
question.
not really. I feel like it's impossible put in the words. But that connection, it comes from a place of complete, I mean, it's ecstatic, it's happy, it's blissful, but more than anything, it's complete control
Wow.
and stillness in the mind. And that's where all these feelings come from. It's that place of stillness and quietness where this sense of love, this beauty,
Right.
this appreciation of life, this gratitude, all these things come through that. A lot of people, they try and embody those things without embodying things from the side of consciousness. They try and force love or force beauty. They try and connect with those different aspects of life.
Yeah.
And really, what happens is when the mind is still and quiet, this love comes out naturally. You don't force anything, you don't create it. That's where a lot of people have it. misunderstood. They think that the human mind, our thoughts, our abilities is able to generate and control consciousness, when in fact, and this is what we've proven through our scientific research, it's consciousness that generates and controls our minds and our realities down to our very emotions. So if we
That,
want to fundamentally change our realities, we have to change the consciousness that programs our realities.
that makes sense. How does that relate to? I have a lot of conversations on here about meditation. I practice meditation myself. My wife does too. Both my kids do as well. Um, how does that relate to like meditation and that type of a state?
So there, from what I see it, there's a difference between true meditation and practicing meditation. Practicing meditation is when you're sitting down and trying to focus your mind. It's an actual practice. It's a trick and a technique, but it's not actual meditation. Meditation occurs when the mind has become quiet, the quiescence of thought. That's true, real meditation. So meditation doesn't start until the mind has reached a state of silence. That's when meditation starts. Everything else is just trying to attain that state. And what I found, and I feel like this is very common in the spiritual community, personal development, essentially anybody who's interested in personal development or wellness or, practicing meditation, spirituality, and religion, is we've come far away from this aspect and this reality of consciousness, this formation of, character. And we've driven ourselves far away from that and really focused more on the dogmatic, right? The ritualistic techniques, rituals, practices, so much so that we've removed it from truth and reality, which is consciousness. It's become removed from that totality. And what I mean by that is there's something in science called conductivity. Okay. And there are certain materials, right, that are more conductive to different types of energies. And so, right, you'll have, like, let's say rubber versus metal, right? One of them is able to be a better conductor for electricity, right? That's easy to understand. So when we're talking about consciousness, if we understand, right, fundamentally that consciousness controls our lives, consciousness controls everything, it controls and regulates everything down from the structure of the atom, right, the very fabric of existence itself, the tiniest particle that exists that composes everything, material and immaterial, right? Consciousness controls and regulates that. It causes it to function and do things in very specific ways. It's the information that tells it what to do. So the more consciousness there is, the higher capacity that object or that material, organic, living or not, is able to function at a higher capacity with better functionality and something that is more beneficial and able to contribute more to the world. It's able to harness more of whatever energy it's capable of harnessing. So an iron bar is another example. I'll just quickly describe this because this is very easy way to think of an enlightened being. Is you have an iron bar, a normal iron bar. If you look at its atomic structure, all the atoms in it are kind of chaotically placed here and there, right? And then you look at an iron bar that has become magnetized. It's now a magnet. It's now a conductor for magnetic energy. When you look at the structure of an iron bar, you see all the atoms are in perfect alignment. They are synced up perfectly. In doing so, this alignment, right? It's not that the iron bar is generating magnetic energy, but rather this alignment allows it to harness magnetic energy that already exists on planet Earth in its environment. So it's harnessing something that already exists and is already there and accessible to everything. The problem is not a lot of people can access it because the conductivity is not there. The alignment with that truth of whatever that magnetic energy is not there. So when that alignment occurs, this magnetic energy is able to flow through it. And in doing so, it can also transform other particles around it too. It can magnetize other particles. It can do a bunch of different things that it wasn't able to do before. So that's exactly what enlightened consciousness is that different levels of consciousness, you're able to harness more of this grace, or we could say more consciousness. And in doing so, this consciousness is able to basically transform our life, everything down from our emotions, our state of mind, our happiness, our finances, down to other people's lives, our associates, our families, people we've met. And up until the point where you have an enlightened being, where their consciousness exceeds the consciousness of nature, and they're able to actually transform even the fabric of reality, where they can create positive impacts in your life, transform your health, your well-being, raise your consciousness so that you can become a better person and optimize your potential, alter your destiny, live a better life.
Yeah,
So
that's
I'll
what a
get to your point.
oh no, that's no, it's an amazing ripple effect. I
Yes,
mean, that's what it sounds like to me. It's an amazing ripple effect.
it is. But what happens is, right? So it's this character, right? That's what it is this alignment of atoms is character. It is our alignment. It is purity and innocence of that material. It is purity and innocence in character. That is what ultimately makes us a better conductor of divine energy, of consciousness, higher consciousness, is maintaining purity and innocence. And if you see all the scripture and all these religious texts, they all talk about purity and innocence. Right? They're different answers, different avenues, and different ways of talking about you have to be a good human being. You have to be pure and innocent. You have to be moral and ethical, right? And in doing so, right, then when you're a superconductor, when you have this sincerity and purity, then maybe meditation can have an impact on your life. But a lot of people haven't even gotten to the point where that sincerity and that purity, right, that consciousness is
Yeah.
there to make something useful, to make something capable of having any practical change in your life.
And I can understand that. And I resonate with that explicitly. I think that when I learned how to connect body, mind, and soul within myself, it gave me a better way of meditating. When I go to meditate, it helped me through all my surgeries. I've had 8 of them, and I think learning a different balance, not to the level that you were explaining earlier, but I think, but also not at a basic level. It allowed me a better opportunity for me to heal, because I was able to heal on an average of 5 to 6 weeks quicker than the average person that went through the same operations that I had gone through, because I was able to. I think I took the pain away. I I did. I cut off all of their, like, the Vicodin and everything else. I told them not to give it to me, and instead we used meditation and we used acupuncture and things like this to help balance everything. Do we all have the opportunity to reach that kind of consciousness that you were just describing?
Well, this is where my journey begins with meeting Guruji. Right. So my mother had this experience, and that's when she, took me to meet him because, she realized that with all the people, all the different things she's tried, right? She's from, Paramahansa Yogananda, from that background. She's tried healing. She's tried alternative medicine. She's tried whatever you can name in the book. She's tried, and she's brought me to it as well. I've tried it as well. And you can notice some incremental changes. And for us, they seem big. They seem really significant in our lives, right? If you're able to improve, your mental state by 2%, 2% compared to where you were before is significant. But what we found scientifically with what we're able to do, this is where we get a lot of confusion from people, is people compare our work with something like Reiki or energy healing. And what I'm telling you is what we're able to do and produce scientifically, nobody else has seen it. We are doing something that is unprecedented, that is really incomparable to what we've seen anywhere else. We're able to do things that science has considered not just improvements in health or psychological parameters, but we're able to see significant things change and happen that science says is impossible, that science says cannot be done, right? We right just concluded a clinical trial. We've concluded a few clinical trials, but one of significant one, we did something called the National Institutes of Health, the NIH toolbox to assess cognitive and motor function. Let me give you perspective. Everything that's been tried, every therapy, every medicine, every pharmaceutical drug, every supplement, whenever that's tested to be released into the market or scientifically validate whatever it's capable or claims to be able to do, the NIH toolbox for cognitive and motor function is always used to assess whether the therapy or the drug has a adverse effect on human cognition and motor function. That's all they're able to do. It doesn't assess if there's improvements. It only assesses if there's any adverse effects, whether there's any toxicity, so that it can be approved right by the FDA and released to the market. Our clinical trial is the first ever clinical trial that used the NIH toolbox and found significant, over 100% improvement in cognition and motor function in all parameters that we tested. We tested things like language and working memory, episodic memory, executive function, and motor function. We did locomotion, dexterity, standing balance, grip strength, and endurance. And in every single one of those parameters, all of the volunteers, we had over 120 volunteers between the ages of 20 to 55, all with huge, psychological problems, psychosomatic problems, problems with relationships and finances, basically all across the board. And we found significant improvements not only in all of these parameters, but the most significant was in this cognition and motor function. And this is recorded in a server in the United States and is locked on the spot on the moment that the data is recorded. So you can't go back and manipulate and change data, and all the data stored in the United States with the National Institutes of Health. So this is unheard of. And this was conducted with us sitting right non-locally. So we were located in Florida, at least I was at the time. I was located in Florida, and all the volunteers were situated in India. And I'm talking about a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled clinical trial. So this is significant and
Yeah.
unprecedented. It's never been done before.
That's very profound transformations that you were able to see, to witness, I think, in regard to that. I think and these type of approaches that you and your husband have taken in regard to helping understand that from a deeper level, and the ultimate effects on that. Have you developed processes to help, I guess, uh, uh, implement changes to that whole thing?
So, in terms of like the processes we developed, do you mean like, how other people can benefit from this as well?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yes. Probably
Right.
that was a better question. I guess my mind is swirling with like a 50 million questions that I really should have written all down.
That's all
But
right.
yes, that's the
I mean,
question.
it's honestly 1 hour is not enough time to share everything. There's so much to talk about. So I
Uh,
understand. It's totally fine.
yeah, it's,
But
it's like it's like wow. Yeah. So that's the best word to describe it. Wow. But yes,
right.
that question, please.
Well, so essentially we have these membership programs, right? But the main thing is, right, there, like I was saying about, Paramahansa Yogananda's, my realization, my awareness from an early age that there is ultimately always a catalyst, someone that's able to
Uh,
perform the function of connecting you with that higher level of consciousness. I don't know if you've ever tried to, change a habit or a pattern in your life or change anything at all. It requires a huge amount of willpower. And that willpower, that comes from consciousness, that comes from higher consciousness, but you still need to access a lot of it to be able to change anything in your life, even if you want to like quit smoking or you just want to
yeah.
wake up earlier, be more productive, focus. To focus, you need higher consciousness, right? To be able
Yeah.
to make decisions, right? To be able to do anything and function at a higher level, even cognitively, that requires higher consciousness. So it's very difficult to do on your own, right? You can make some changes and it can be a much slower path. And you can see improvements. You can see changes in your life when you always take the higher road. You always follow the better path. You apply your willpower, right? The way you
Mhm.
engage with life and other people. You can see improvements and you can see changes, but it takes a lot more effort on your own, a significant amount of time. And who knows? Like I was aware that, without someone helping me, without someone, like, if you want to learn about finances or you want to learn how to be successful, right? You want to find somebody who's done it before.
Yeah.
You want to find somebody who's already created that path and is able to tell you these are the pitfalls, this is what to do, this is what not to do. And as well, there's something that's transmitted just by being around those kind of people, where naturally you kind of follow. The science has actually found when you're working alongside someone else, when you're in the proximity of someone else and you coordinate together, even if it's unspoken, nonverbal communication, there is something that happens where neuroscientifically our brains synchronize with each other, and we actually end up following similar habits and behavioral patterns and actually start to mimic the same characteristics as the person we're working alongside, the
Mm.
person we're associated with. So you can understand that even who we're associated with makes a dramatic impact in our consciousness. So for me, the person I associated with that I chose for my path that made the most significant impact over anything else I've tried is meeting someone who was already enlightened and already connected. And this person for me was Guruji Mahendra Trivedi.
Right.
When I met him, I was 20 years of age. And it was really funny on the car ride there. My mom was telling me about him and saying he's not like a traditional guru. He doesn't wear like the saffron robes. He doesn't have a long beard, and he doesn't talk about like the Bhagavad Gita and all these things. He talks about science. He talks about what happens science. He talks about practical outcome. He doesn't force, he's not like, indoctrinated into any religious sphere or
Right.
anything like that. He simply had a transcendental experience. He worked as an insurance investigator before his enlightenment, right? He was a mechanical engineer. He didn't have a background, working as like a monk or anything like that. He had just had this direct experience with consciousness, because consciousness is not a religious thing. It's not a spiritual thing. It's just a life thing. It's
Right.
very much all about life. It's what life is. So whatever context you want to put it in, I talk about it in terms of consciousness, because when we get into God and spirituality, it can be very divisive for people, and people tend to stray away. So he harnesses this pure consciousness that is the essence and substance of everything that we are. So when I was on this car ride with my mom, she was telling me about him. And the funny thing is, right, I was looking to meet this person, and when I was hoping to get a blessing from this man, and she was hoping that he would bless me, so that through this higher consciousness I would be able to meet this person. I didn't know that he was that person at the time when we were driving to meet him. I thought I would get to meet this person, and this blessing would help me find this person in my life, right? Because I also knew this person was my husband. And at the time, my brain didn't connect the dots that
Right.
you could marry a guru, because every guru I've seen is always celibate, unmarried, they're on their own. So I'm like, I didn't know you could marry a guru. So I didn't connect the dots. I thought he would help me find this being, though. But in the car right there, I entertained the thought. It was my intuition, but my brain took over. And I entertained the thought that wouldn't it be funny if I was going to meet this man and receive a blessing from him to, help me meet this other man? It turned out he was that person. And
The
lo
universe
and
brought you
behold, he was
together.
that
Yeah, the
person.
universe brought you together because that's where you're supposed to be. That's pretty cool, actually. That's a yeah. That's a pretty good story to relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty slick.
And that was in 2011. And then, I had my own awakening. I was able to, become a conduit in the same way that he is now. I went through my own enlightenment, and this happened in 2012. And now I'm able to also act as this conduit myself, this
Right.
catalyst for other people. So that's exactly what we've experienced, is that everybody, we're not saying that's only unique to certain people, but everybody can attain this state of consciousness. But ultimately, it helps a lot if you have somebody who can act as like a jumper cable, who can help
Yeah.
transform your consciousness by harnessing this. There's nature. Sorry, this will be a little bit of a long-winded answer, but nature, right? The fabric of nature has consciousness. And what nature is able to do is nature creates new materials, new species. Everything is controlled and operated by these natural laws. Okay. And what happens with these natural laws is these laws control and dictate everything. They make everything operate within a certain level of parameters, and that's about it. So, like your body temperature, it's never going to go above or below a certain temperature. Otherwise, you'll die or go into a coma, right? Or you'll have brain damage. Something will happen that's very adverse to life. So, nature's maintaining life within a certain set parameters. So, when we're talking about changing the mind and personal development, changing our consciousness, right? You have to understand that that's very difficult to do because nature has this set of regulations that keeps things in a particular box. It keeps things the way they are. That's why everybody feels this resistance when they try and make a change in their life. They feel some incredible force pressuring, resisting themselves, whether it's an outside force, the circumstances of life, or within their own minds and their own consciousness. This huge resistance, and that's the consciousness of nature that we're operating within, right? You'll see gravity, water flows always downhill and never uphill, right? These are natural laws. Nature has designed things this way so that things can function and operate without chaos. Now, if we want to change whatever nature has designed, we need to operate outside of the bounds of nature. And in doing so, and in operating outside of the bounds of nature, you can then change these natural laws. And so, this consciousness that exists outside of the bounds of nature is enlightened consciousness. So this consciousness has the freedom, it has the capacity, the control to be able to harness this pure consciousness, which is it is a part of. It has been completely immersed into that consciousness. It can take it, harness it, and transmit it to everything that exists within nature to change nature, to optimize the potential, to raise consciousness. And when we understand that everything is created by consciousness down to the very atom, right? If we want to understand that this is consciousness, this is higher consciousness, universal consciousness, or maybe we can go so far as to say even God, that this is God that's changing things through an enlightened person, through an enlightened being, then what would that show scientifically? And that's where we started investigating all this scientific research. What will that show? You can't directly measure something that's so abstract like God, but what can you measure? You can measure its effects, right? And that's exactly what we did in science. We measured the effects. What can a consciousness that supersedes the consciousness of nature do to nature? And how can that prove that God is real or that this consciousness is real?
Like it's a brilliant way of kind of connecting both of those because obviously we have to believe in science. Science does exist; it's a reality. But I think convincing individuals or validating to people who have doubts and or enhancing those individuals that want to seek a more of the divine and a connection to that, creating that connection. You can't see my hands moving. Creating that connection the between science and nature and the divine. It's a what a brilliant way to be able to connect to make that connection. I think it opens doors and windows for people to be able to have a better understanding.
It's true because science, like, there's an incredible quote from a scientist, Dr. Rustum Roy, where he says, science is the new religion of the world. Everybody relies on science for something. Science
Yeah,
has advanced, medicine, technology. It has advanced our society in ways that some people feel religion and spirituality have failed to do.
yeah,
It doesn't have the same practical comforts and outcomes that we're able to witness that science and technology is able to do immediately,
right.
right? Very visibly and practically. So that's why there's been this huge divide because you can see a greater outcome scientifically, and spirituality and religion a lot of time they've denied certain truths and fundamentals about life, and then they've used this subjectivity of their experiences to manipulate and control other people and do poor things in the name of religion and spirituality that have turned a lot of people away, and it's really unfortunate. So, what we're doing at Divine Connection International, right, and this is the message that I've wanted to share, that I've shared at the Business World's Festival of Wellbeing at NASDAQ, like you were saying, the CW, Fox, ABC, NBC, all these different platforms. I've been just trying to share that what science is missing. It's this fundamental principle of the existence of consciousness. And so long as science is missing consciousness, right? This existence of this more maybe spiritual realm, or what religion and spirituality is able to recognize and acknowledge, it's going to find that it's going to reach capacity in many different avenues of life. And one of those capacities you see, right, is, for example, in agriculture. It's also happening in mental health with our mental health crisis, right? You see how it's dividing humanity and dividing the world. There are many different things that science and medicine are still, at their limits at being able to fully address or even understand. Science to this day, with all of its technology available to it, has not been able to map out one human brain. It's not capable of doing that yet. So science, as advanced as it has come, it's still in its infancy and understanding the nature of reality and consciousness and what a human really is. And so, and then spirituality needs the practical assessment from science. It needs to be validated. It needs some kind of something to rely on, something to provide practical outcome to show that if it's something real, why should you waste your time on something that might entertain you or might create drama and makes you feel like something's happening, or maybe only something at an incremental level, when you could be moving from here 20% to 100%, right? Why should we waste our time if we're given this life? Whether there are more lives or just this one life, if we're given this life, why would you want to waste time? Why don't you want to do everything you can to transform your life, to become happier, to become prosperous, to have good relationships, to take advantage of everything available to you? And so I feel like science is missing a lot of that from spirituality, and spirituality the same thing from science. And they should work together. They need to work together if they want to advance each other at all, let alone answer our most common problems we're facing today.
I agree with that. I think that we as human beings, especially with the noise, the immense amount of noise that has evolved over the last few decades with regard to everything. I mean, everybody's got their nose in a phone, and you constantly are hit with the media and with the wars and the violence and the negativity and all of this that is being thrown at us on a consistent daily basis with regard to, do you listen to ABC? Do you listen to Fox? Do you listen to CNN? Who do you listen to? Uh, Everything that's happening right now. How can we, through all of that kind of chaos, how can we raise consciousness through divine blessings to help us overcome our personal limitations in spite of all that noise? I mean, because everything you just spoke about, I think is an opportunity for us to improve ourselves, not only ourselves but the humanity that we all coexist with, as well as nature.
I mean, that's the fundamental problem, is raising consciousness. That's really all that's required, that is
Whoops.
needed to be able to solve this problem. That everything, all the most prominent problems we have can all be answered from the level of consciousness, from consciousness itself. And that's what we've shown, right? We have over 6,000 science studies, 660 peer-reviewed science publications. All of these are available in over 2,000 universities in over 130 countries, right? I'm talking about not small universities. I'm like, MIT, Oxford, Yale, Cambridge. It's available with the National Institutes of Health and the US government, right? That's how significant our results are. That these institutions, have grabbed it for themselves and are putting them in their own university libraries. And what we've shown, I mean, we've worked with, you know, non-living materials, we worked with living materials, right? Like I was saying, like a lot of these problems you see today, one of the biggest problems with agriculture, for example, is this inability to produce crops without the use of some kind of pesticide, fungicide, chemical, right, fertilizer. There's so many chemicals, organic and inorganic, both are chemicals, right? And right, you need something to be able to produce these crops. It's impossible to provide for humanity in the world to produce all the crops that we utilize today to feed everybody without applying some kind of chemical, without, essentially harming our soil, destroying its bacterial composition, making it harder for future generations to be able to eat those same produce. right? And then at the same time, all these toxic chemicals are entering our environment. We're ingesting them. They're entering into our groundwater, and that's very difficult to go away. So we're creating a very toxic environment, and you see cancer rates are rising. You see all these different things that are, byproducts of this inability to solve this one problem. And what we found, right, our research in agriculture is that, right, by administering these transmissions of higher consciousness, right, of these divine blessings, again, divine grace, whatever you want to call it, right, by raising the consciousness of these crops, we've seen that without the use of any chemicals whatsoever, I'm talking fertilizers, pesticides, weedicides, fungicides, absolutely no chemical, no addition, the only thing added, water. That's it, right? A completely pristine, organic, completely untouched crop. And just by raising its consciousness, you're able to see a 500% improvement in yield, 600% improvement in plant immunity. You're able to see, you know, like a shelf life increase by over 100%. You're able to see all these improvements, things that science literally cannot produce a crop without using a, fertilizer, fungicide, or pesticide. And we're able to do it without, simply by raising its consciousness. The same thing happens with materials. By raising its consciousness, right, we have been able to, our most significant science research, aside from our cognitive and motor function study with the recent clinical trial, is our ability to change the atom. And I have to emphasize how significant this is because, the atom is the smallest building block of life, of all that there is. Right? And science has not been able to change the atom. Science is incapable of doing so. It's considered an impossibility, right? And there's a scientific law that says energy can neither be created nor can it be destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form into another, right? That's because it's operating within the bounds of that nature's consciousness, which controls it. It keeps the atom this way. The only thing we can do is destroy the atom by infusing a lot of energy into it. The atomic bomb is the greatest example. But we can't change something that nature has created. We can't change the atom scientifically. We haven't found a way to do that. And what we found is with our scientific studies, by applying the power of consciousness, by harnessing this power, transmitting it to materials, right? The ways you can measure, right, how the atom is changed is in, the different characteristics and behaviors that material exhibits. Because a material, it exhibits very, strict set of parameters that shows you what kind of material it is. That's where the whole periodic table of elements is created from, that this is the atom and that's how the atom is for that material. So, right, we have things like boiling points, melting points, right, latent heats, all these different things that are static and they stay the same. And the moment you're able to change the information within the atom, naturally we can expect, right, it's the same way. You measure divine through its effects. So we can see that the atom has changed by its effects on its character and behavior. And we have seen melting points change, boiling points change, burning points, latent heats. We've seen that the atom is able to change in mass and weight and size. We've seen that the atom, the energy within the atom, between the atoms, and distance between atoms has been able to alter through this power of consciousness, which basically is saying that we have changed the atom. We've changed the isotopic abundance. We've changed the atom. We've created something that doesn't exist on this planet, an entirely new atom for that material. And that's something that science cannot do. And so if we can change the atom, you can understand that the application of this energy is limitless. It can be applied to anything. What happens with plants and trees? We're able to, through the power of consciousness, increase its chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is something that science says is static. It doesn't change. Right? We've changed the chlorophyll levels through the power of consciousness. We've been able to increase chlorophyll A and B and total chlorophyll by upwards of like 93%, 30%, different variations for the different levels of chlorophyll. What this does is naturally, by increasing this chlorophyll level, the plant's ability to harness the energy from the sun increases. As a result, so does its self-healing ability, so does its immunity, so does its yield, so does its productivity, right? It becomes a better, more useful plant. The same application applies to humans, and what we've seen in all of our studies with cancer research, human health and wellness, in our clinical trials and in our real life testimonials, right? We've blessed over 300,000 people. Over 300,000 people have received this energy.
Well,
And what happens is when you are able to raise the consciousness of the individual, their whole life changes as a byproduct of that. So they're able to, they can meditate deeper. I mean, that's one of the benefits. They can get more out of those practices. But you see relationships improve, quality of life improves, right? We've seen reversal in aging. We've seen people, like some of the quickest improvements people experience is their hair, skin, and nails improve, right? The rate at which their nails and their hair grows is increased by just 2 weeks. Their skin cell turnover, right? The moment after 2 weeks time, you see they have this natural glow. Their
mhm.
sleep is deeper, right? They sleep maybe less amount of time and they're able to wake up more refreshed and more energetic, right? Nothing else has changed in their life. They haven't introduced a new therapy. They haven't done anything different. They've just received this energy. They've received this blessing, right? They've been connected to the God of their understanding. That's how we word it, because it's not a religion or, spiritual dogmatic practice. It's strictly your relationship with God, however you perceive that. We have atheists who receive our blessings, right? Who don't have a particular framework or understanding of God, but they believe there's something out there. There's consciousness, maybe. Maybe it's a more scientific approach. We have people from all walks of life who come here, and every one of them experiences the benefits. It has nothing to do with their belief system. Plants don't have a belief system, materials don't have a belief system, animals don't really have a belief system. We think that all these things require us to believe in them or have faith in them, and what we're showing scientifically is that's not required. Science is science and outcome is outcome. If it's there, it'll make an impact, it'll change your life. And I have a few dramatic testimonials I'd love to share with you.
Oh, please do. But I do have one question, though, if I can throw this in there.
Absolutely.
What, with everything that you had just spoke about, it brings a question up. How does soul awareness play into finding all of this together? Because I believe in this is my personal belief that, we all have a soul. And I think that I do my best to connect my mind, body, and my soul. And I try to do that through my divine perspective and my spiritual perspective in regard to where we live, how we live, and including nature. And it seems to me that everything that you just said, I think that would have a profound effect on our souls.
What I would say is what's happening is we are empowering the soul. We are giving the soul leadership over our lives to dictate our realities. Because the soul is our connection to God.
Right.
That is how we communicate God, right? When I was telling you those experiences I was having, that's coming from my own soul and its own connection to God. I had this fundamental understanding from a very young age that through my own awareness, I was connected to God. I felt God right in, like the Bible and everything, it talks about God is omniscient and omnipresent. And in doing so, that means God exists everywhere in all things. And part of that is the soul, right? That presence by which we can connect with God is through our own souls. The problem is, right, because of science's inability to fully acknowledge the existence of the soul and consciousness, because science requires something you can measure and touch and feel, or it requires something that, it can objectively identify. And the soul's one of those things similar to God, whereas objectively hard to identify, but you see its effects, the same thing, right? If you're able to empower the soul, if you're able to empower someone's life through the soul, that raising consciousness, essentially, right? It's like take the sun for example. When it's nighttime, we don't assume the sun's not there anymore. We know the sun's there because we can still see its outcome. Might not be able to see the sun, but we can still feel its warmth, right? If the sun were not there, the world would freeze over. There would be it would be completely uninhabitable by all life, right? But knowing the sun's there, that means life is there. That means that, there is warmth, that there is some visible light even in the darkness. There is still something there that we can measure, an outcome of some kind of reflection of something else's existence. And same way, it's like, if you take, a cup of water and you add salt or you add sugar into it, right? You can tell that the salt or sugar is there because now it's become salty or sweet because it has a particular flavor. You might not have seen someone pour the salt or sugar into it, but you can tell because it has a different taste now. It no longer tastes like just water. Now it tastes like salty water, sweet water. Same thing scientifically. This soul, this connection to divine, right? To this day, I have seen no other modality that is able to empower the soul like what we have been able to show scientifically, right? And
Yeah.
so this is something that, you know, when we include the soul into science, when we include the soul into our existence and finally acknowledge the soul, the reason why so many people have problems, right, is because they're not fully acknowledging this presence that's there, that connects all of us together, that is our essence and our beings, right? That connects us. We could, if you want to call the soul, or if you want to call it simply consciousness, whatever it is, it's our essence, right? And it's the thing that connects us with this pure consciousness, right? Coming from this universal, collective, pure consciousness that is far superseding the human collective consciousness. And so, right, the problem with society, our culture, our education, the government, everything today is because we have denied this part of our lives for so long. We don't acknowledge it. We don't, right? It's not in our educational system. You don't learn about it. You don't learn about this part of your life. The only ways to learn about it are through religion and spirituality. And that has become so infiltrated by so many, different approaches, so much chaos, so much,
Yeah.
insincerity, we can say that it's hard for a person to navigate and find the truth. And then on top of that, you're battling your own consciousness. And your own consciousness, everything you perceive, that's your own perception, right?
Yeah.
If you see consciousness as like a bandwidth, right? Like a parameters, you can't see beyond this bandwidth. It's like a radio station. You have one radio station you're listening to, you don't know what's on the other one because you can only hear the one you're listening to.
Right.
Same thing, if consciousness is determining our perceptions, our states of mind, our emotions, we don't know what else is available out there until we experience a different level of consciousness. And that's hard to do on our own. But when you have someone, this catalyst that can do that for you, and that's why we have these membership programs, is it's a catalyst who's able to harness this higher consciousness, raise your consciousness, and in doing so, you actually experience higher states of consciousness. You connect with a different part of life. It transforms your reality. You see life differently, feel life differently, and its effects on you, it changes your potential and your destiny. So I think it's absolutely imperative that you have someone who can help connect you to higher consciousness. It's very difficult to do on your own. You need a catalyst.
Well, especially with all the, like I said earlier, all the noise in this world, all the distractions, all of the chaos that's going on around us. It's very difficult to concentrate. It's very difficult to grasp onto something that we can hold on to, and then walk a path that needs to be walked because of all the chaos that's going on around us. We can all find peace and tranquility in certain perspectives, but sometimes we have to have somebody walk beside us or push us from behind or walk, pull us from the front and guide us through it, so to speak.
It's like if you've ever, like you're going through a particular situation in your life and, you're talking to like a friend of yours and they're giving you advice on what you can do. It's easier for someone
Yeah.
outside to give you advice or to help uplift you, right? But the moment they're sad and depressed with you, you can't uplift each other. You can't do anything for
Yeah.
each other. But when someone's there from an outside perspective and they're coming from a higher place, they can help you. And just being with them and talking through with them, or just being by association, you feel better. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just one very easy, practical way to see how different consciousnesses, when they associate with each other, they can alter your own consciousness. Well, imagine, you know, some bigger form of consciousness,
Yeah.
having access to that, what that can do for you.
Yeah. It'd be like the big kahuna, as they say in Hawaii.
One of the greatest things, if you don't mind me saying one more thing, one of the greatest things that,
One more thing before you go.
affect, one more thing before you go.
Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
Oh, it's perfect. The synchronicity. But one of the greatest things that I've seen nowadays that really affects our quality of life, that has the greatest impact, I would say, on our quality of life, is stress. I mean, stress is the greatest source of inflammation. It's the greatest source. Harvard and a lot of universities and institutions are actually coming up with this idea that it's chronic inflammation that is the cause of all the diseases and disorders we see today that are most prevalent. Chronic inflammation, and the greatest source of inflammation that we see in our stress in our lives is stress. And the greatest source of our stress is, of course, stress doesn't exist anywhere else except within our own minds.
I
And what
agree.
happens is when you're able to control your mind, right? And there's a problem. There's this concept, this idea that, you must have, it's not about stopping thoughts, but it's about having a lot of positive thoughts. You must have a lot of positive thoughts, and those will make you happier and will improve your health and change your quality of life. When in reality, these positive thoughts, if they're not centered in practicality and realism, they're actually considered positive delusional thoughts. And they actually are another way of you, first of all, prevents you from growing, from being, sincere with life and yourself and your own consciousness. It prevents you from seeing reality because it's thoughts that prevent you from seeing the truth. It's thoughts that prevent you from connecting to higher levels of consciousness, whether it be good or bad thoughts. They're there, and they're the one things that inhibit you from experiencing, like I
Mhm.
said, what comes from that stillness, that place of higher consciousness, that place of God, whatever you want to call it. It's this place of stillness, not positive thoughts, but stillness of thought. And from that stillness of thought, this incredible beauty, this happiness, right? So many people, because they're so used to being unhappy, right? And most of where we get our sources on how to be happy are from people who really aren't happy.
Yeah, that's
And so
unfortunate, but
we
yes.
trust these people. We trust these people for advice on how to be happy, right? You have to be successful. You have to do this. You have to do that. You have to think positive and do things like this and follow these practices and biohack and do all these neurolinguistic
Yeah.
programming. There are a bunch of different things out there. And, it's exhausting how many decisions and options you have in the world. It's your nervous system is not meant to process all that information. And yet here we are. And you would assume that if there's anything that really exists out there, right, what we've seen is the amount of mental health problems and the size of the wellness industry are both increasing,
Yeah.
right? And the wellness industry is a multi-trillion dollar industry. It's 3 times larger or 4 times larger now than the pharmaceutical industry. And so this is a booming industry that's increasing multifold. So it not only highlights the need for this in our lives, how much of like a pandemic this mental health crisis is, how much
Mm.
it's affecting our quality of life, our stress, and our health, but also the fact that there are no answers out there. Because if there was an answer, then there wouldn't be so many options, and the amount of mental health crises wouldn't be increasing with the growing size of the wellness industry.
That's a
So,
very
I
brilliant
mean,
observation. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I
So,
think,
I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry, go on.
Oh, but I think that the prevalence of the of mental health within the society and culture these days has really exponentially grown in the recognition of it, and unfortunately, the majority of what is used to suppress that are pharmaceuticals, and pharmaceuticals enough that are detrimental to the health of the mind and the body ultimately, because they compound upon each other, and they usually mix two or three of them at the same time. And it to me, it just, yes, I think that it's an issue, it's a problem that needs to be addressed, but more from a holistic perspective.
Absolutely. And like what these drugs do, like your mental health is okay so long as you're taking the drug, right?
Yeah,
And again, you don't know the adverse effects it's having. And what it really does is it prevents you from being aware,
yeah.
right? It numbs the mind. It doesn't actually, solve. Even scientists don't really know how a lot of depressants and how a lot of these things that block neurotransmitters or improve uptakes and everything, how they function in terms of the mind and mental health. If we can't even map out one human brain, we're trusting our brains, our minds, on somebody who doesn't even understand or comprehends fully the nature of the mind and what it does and what it's capable of, and we're trusting that with pharmaceutical drugs to alter it permanently sometimes. So, I
But
mean, that can be
yeah,
very devastating and very scary thing. And I feel like that should be, taken into consideration.
I agree with that 100%. I would love to keep talking for another hour or two. or
Would
this could
love
really
to
go
as
into
well.
about a 3 hour talk. But I think this is one more thing before you go. So before you go, do you have any words of wisdom you could share?
Um, Life is good. Life is happy. If life isn't happy, maybe we should look at what's stopping us, right? Nature has is it's actually natural. That is a natural law that life moves in the direction that promotes its growth and happiness. And if we're not moving in the direction of growth and happiness, we need to understand that there's something in our environment, there's something we're not able to assess or see correctly, that there's something vital that we're missing. And all the problems today you can see can all be answered from a level of higher consciousness. No problem can be solved from the level of consciousness that created it, right? I think those are the words of John F. Kennedy. And you see, all the problems that exist today can only be answered through higher consciousness, through this divine connection. So, if you want to really experience what life could be, not what you think life could be, but what life really could be, I would really encourage you just try it. See what could happen. Try it.
Take that first step. Take that first step. Profound words of wisdom. Profound words of wisdom.
Thank you.
Dahryn, thank you
Thank you,
very
Michael.
much for being here. Thank you very much for an amazing conversation. I would love to have another one with you. I think we can continue this conversation down the road.
Love.
You have so much more to teach and so much more to help inspire, motivate, and educate. So thank you.